The city of Qeynos has for centuries stood against evil. In the present day, the saber-toothed gnolls of Blackburrow launch offensive after offensive against the Qeynosians, but are always repelled. The agents of Freeport continue to sabotage Qeynosian efforts in the unending rivalry between Queen Antonia Bale and Lucan Delaire. The undead, remnants of skirmishes long ago, roam outside the city walls, and bandits prey upon weary travelers, but none of these can compare to the War of Plagues. Ignited by a mage called the Undying and the Bloodsaber cult, the war claimed thousands of lives as Quinos fought for its very survival against the undead hordes. Quinos, on the cusp of defeat, barely claimed victory with the destruction of the Undying. But this was no ordinary campaign of conquest. The War of Plagues had its beginnings years before the Undying surfaced, where it was born out of one man's burning desire for vengeance. This man was Valdordas Varsoon. On the plains of Corana, in the region now known as the Thundering Steppes, there once stood a keep known as the Keep of Immortality. This is the home of Varsoon, a mysterious mage whose past nobody living knew. All but those who had the fortune to meet him knew was that Varsoon was powerful. Skilled in the mystic arts, Varsoon awed everyone he met. He was without equal, but what truly astounded other mages was his goal of cheating death. Varsoon explained to any who would listen that he was seeking the path to immortality, and would welcome any who wished to join him. Varsoon's words were persuasive to many. Several mages abandoned the Concordium in Qeynos to assist Varsoon. One of these apprentices later explained his reasoning. I believed in the words he said. Though we could not see his face, I knew his words were honest. I packed up my belongings and followed him to the plains of Corana, where he had built a keep to research the way to stop death. Varsoon always kept his face concealed wherever he ventured. Although he certainly seemed to be hiding something, Varsoon only continued to gather more disciples. This group of disciples soon became known as the House of Varsoon. They were loyal to a fault, and as Varsoon started to reveal more of his motives, their devotion to the mystic arts only grew. Varsoon started teaching his acolytes the forbidden art of necromancy, and they began with reanimating removed organs. At first we started using cattle. We would cut them open and learn how to keep the insides still alive when we put the organs in with jars. We were to do this all throughout the day, looking for ways to instill unlife within the organs while using as little magic as possible. But the acquisition of knowledge could only go so far without there being a breaking point for some. One apprentice who had succeeded in this initial stage glimpsed the next stage of Varsoon's plans and fled. Arriving at the gates of Qeynos, he confessed everything to the Qeynos Council. Barsoon had approached him personally, and the apprentice saw exactly why he kept his face hidden. Barsoon's face was horribly disfigured and suggested that he'd been alive for many, many years. Barsoon entreated his apprentice to discover how to undo unlife and showed him his own efforts. There, in his personal chambers, the apprentice experienced a horror that exposed the depravity of Varsoon. Varsoon had been seeking a cure for his disfigurement, experimenting on various living beings over the centuries, hoping to find the cure for his state through experimentation. These experiments were frozen between life and death, existing in a constant state of anguish. Should the apprentice fail, Varsoon said, he would join those experiments. The Qeynosians, after verifying the man's story, swiftly mustered an army to dispatch this evil, arriving at the plains of Corana and descending upon the house of Varsoon. Varsoon and his acolytes were caught completely off guard by the attack. A magic battle of an epic scale ensued, with Varsoon conjuring spells that had not been witnessed for centuries. Varsoon, however, was defeated. Imprisoned with his followers, Varsoon could only watch as his fortress burned to ashes. Varsoon himself met the same fate of his fortress a short time later. Observed by a crowd of thousands, Varsoon was burned alive and his ashes were buried in the countryside. His reign of terror, it seemed, had ended. But Varsoon survived. Varsoon was an undead creature of great power who had long since devised the means of cheating death. Furious at the Qeynosians for destroying centuries of work, Varsoon quietly bided his time and waited for the opportunity to seek retribution. Centuries passed before Varsoon's reappearance, this time calling himself the Undying and at the head of a cult known as the Bloodsabers. The Bloodsabers, worshippers of Protoxylus the Plaguebringer, suddenly stepped out of the shadows after hundreds of years of quiet worship. The continent of Antonica soon faced an undead plague that threatened to sweep through the entire continent. Qeynos was besieged, and the war only grew more horrible as the years dragged on. As the undead began to swarm into the Qeynos hills, the legendary bard Valen spotted their advance and rushed to warn Qeynos with magnificent bells he himself had designed. As the bells told their dreadful warning, Valen performed some of the largest bark spells known to Norath, hoping desperately that Qeynos would receive the warning in time. Valen perished as a horde of undead swarmed him, but he continued to toll the bells until his very last breath. Varsoon, seeking to crush Qeynos swiftly, ordered the Bloodsabers to poison Qeynos' water supply. As people drank the contaminated water, a virulent sickness broke out in the city, killing thousands. The bodies made a horrible stench, unable to be buried as no guards could protect the mourners. Thus, to unclog the streets and reduce risk of further contamination, many of the bodies were burned and buried in urns within the catacombs. Only to the apt leadership of Cain Bale, captain of the Qeynos Guard and younger brother of Antonius Bale IV, along with the fierce resolve of the soldiers, kept the city from breaking. Captain Bale posted guards at every entrance to Qeynos to ensure that no Bloodsabers or mindless undead breached the city. The catacombs themselves were also patrolled by the guard, as the Bloodsabers could enter the city from the underground. This decision, however, was met with unease from some of his subordinates. Reinforcements were assigned to the catacombs rather than on the surface, where fighting was still fierce, but Cain Bale remained steadfast in his decision. The people, meanwhile, were scared. They saw the Undying as Varsoon returned to life, and though they didn't know it, they were right. Varsoon, delighting in their fear, styled himself as Varsoon the Undying, and rained horrible spells of disease and decay upon the city. Varsoon's followers relished in the ways they were honoring the Plaguebringer. One of Varsoon's most powerful followers, Lord Grimrot, wielded the scythe known as pestilence, cutting through swaths of the guard as if they were blades of grass. Grimrot's scythe was a powerful artifact, imbued with the power of Bertoxulus, and it tied so intrinsically to Grimrot's life force that, should he fall in battle, one only needed the scythe to raise him to fight again. These were the terrifying odds that the Qeynosians were up against, an undying army with undying commanders, all bent on raising their city to the ground. Cain Bale had some difficult decisions to make. Should the city fall, he knew the citizens would not be safe, and so he made a decision with his chief officers. Instead of remaining within the city, the guard would send groups of non-combatants with small escorts to relative safety in the Qeynos hills. This way, should Qeynos fall, the people would live on. It was this thought process that passed through the mind of one of Bale's most seasoned commanders, Captain Vegelus Keldrain. Keldrain was a competent commander, but above all he was loyal to Qeynos and its people. Keldrain had 3 lieutenants under him who, similar to Keldrain, would never betray Qeynos and worshipped Keldrain as a hero. One was Aiden, a grizzled, stout-hearted old soldier who knew well the workings of war. Keldrain and Aiden were so close in their friendship that Aiden considered them practically brothers. Another was Vargon, an idealist who, more than the others, idolized Keldrain as the greatest commander Qeynos had ever seen. The Qeynos Guard was all he lived for, and he served it with pride. But perhaps the most tragic of the 3 was Borthon. Borthon, like Aiden and Vargon, was devoted to Keldrain. Something else, however, bound Borthon to his unswerving loyalty, his love for Keldrain's daughter, Varulus. Borthon and Varulus were engaged, a decision Keldrain himself approved of. Borthon's gratitude to his commanding officer was endless, as was his love for Varulus. The 2 were to be married, but unfortunately, war does not wait for love. Vegelus Keldrain was my commanding officer. He did me a great honor, allowing his daughter to return my affections. We were to be married, but the war intervened. Keldrain ordered the women who did not bear arms away from the city as the plague approached. Varulus went with them. Keldrain relayed the orders given to him by Captain Bale. A small detail of the Qeynos Guard would escort the women and children out of the city to safety. Many approved of the plan, but one voice rose above the rest: Vargon. Vargon, his dedication to the honor of the Guard standing above all else, decried the plan as cowardice. To send the people away, he said, it was tantamount to admitting failure. Keldrain tried to reason with Vargon, but Vargon would not listen. He saw the plan as a sign of Keldrain's weakness and stormed off. Although Vargon remained in Keldrain's service, the bond between them would never be the same. Despite Vargon's objections, the plan proceeded. Several of Keldrain's own soldiers counted their families amongst departing civilians, including Aiden, who bade farewell to his wife and daughters. Varulus too left the city to the great sorrow of both Borthon and Keldrain. Thus, the women and children fled Qeynos, hoping to avoid the plague before it was too late. They would not make it. Borthon and Keldrain knew nothing of what had happened, but Aiden, hours before an assault plan for the catacombs, heard what had happened. Aiden, stricken with grief, blamed Keldrain for the deaths of his family, for it was Keldrain who gave the order. Aiden never again saw Keldrain as a brother. Like Vargon, their bond would remain forever shattered. Keldrain, meanwhile, had received intelligence that undead activity was increasing within the catacombs, and so Keldrain devised another plan, this one much more fatal than he imagined. Within the catacombs, there were several tunnels where, if soldiers were strategically placed there, they could cut off the escape routes of the Bloodsabers. Keldrain sought to use these tunnels and ensure a swift victory for his troops. As they descended into the catacombs, they split into 4 teams, 3 led by his lieutenants and 1 led by Keldrain himself. Unfortunately, almost as soon as they entered the catacombs, they were overwhelmed from the same points they had planned to set up. The Bloodsabers poured in from all directions, and while the guard fought hard, they began to lose ground. Perhaps the deciding factor of the skirmish was when Vargon, dragging Aiden with him, found Borthon. Yes, Vargon came to me, pulling our friend Aiden behind him, screaming at me to drop my weapons and flee. Keldrain is lost, he cried, and now we will all perish. His warning was prophetic, but untimely. Keldrain was slain, and almost all of the troops under his command followed him. Aiden, Borthon, and Vargon all perished within the catacombs. All 4 men remain in the catacombs as ghosts, tormented by the risen remains of their enemies. On the surface, the battle still raged ferociously. Barsoon and his followers seemed to have the upper hand. It would not be long before Qeynos fell. But then something peculiar happened. Barsoon made an oddly specific demand to Qeynos. Hand over every second-born child, and the city would be spared. Barsoon no doubt sought to continue his research from where he had left before the destruction of the Keep of Immortality, but the Bloodsabers, it seems, did not agree with Barsoon's demands. Whether it was because they wished to dedicate the whole city to Bertoxilis, or if they found Barsoon's request horrifying, is unknown. This indecision did, however, cause dissension within the Bloodsaber ranks, and that was all the Qeynos Guard needed. The tide began to turn, and Varsoon's forces were slowly pushed back. At last, on what is now called Qeynos Hill, the final battle of the War of Plagues was fought. The Bloodsabers fought like demons, emboldened by the presence of the Plaguebringer's avatar himself. The Qeynosians fought with a similar determination, with the king himself leading the assault. Antonius fought the Avatar of Disease by himself, wielding the sacred Qeynos Claymore. The fight was hard, but Antonius persevered and drove back the Avatar. Qeynos was victorious, and the Bloodsabers routed. As they searched the bodies, they discovered Varsoon himself amongst the cadavers. He was severely burned all over his body, and appeared to have an arrow to the heart, so that finally felled him. Those who discovered Varsoon, however, found to their shock that Varsoon was still alive. As word spread that Varsoon had been found, priests from the Temple of Life arrived, and confirming that it was Varsoon the Undying, performed a ritual upon his body. The ritual lasted for hours, but was eventually completed. Dozens of spells lay over Varsoon's body to keep him from rising again. The body was burned again, but this time the priests placed it within a crypt constructed in the Qeynos Hills. The crypt was sealed and given its own enchantments. Lord Grimrot too had fallen, and with many of the remaining dead was buried in the nearby Firemist Gully. Barsoon, it seemed, was locked away, and the Bloodsabers were finished. But the Bloodsabers were not fully vanquished. The remainder of their number fled deep into the Qeynos catacombs, from which they had besieged the city. Lurking within the catacombs, they bide their time, waiting for the Undying to lead them once again. Peace at long last descended upon Qeynos, but some still wondered how the Bloodsabers had anticipated so many of their tactics. The only answer was that there had been traitors in the guard who had sold out their brethren for personal power. How else could the Bloodsabers have made such strides? How else could they have lost their families when they thought they were being sent to safety? How else could the great Vegalus Keldrain have fallen in battle? Amongst all these questions, one burned above the rest. Who would do such a thing? I never did discover how Keldrain was betrayed, but you do. As you venture into the Crypt of Betrayal, deep within the catacombs, you encounter Keldrain and his 3 lieutenants. Keldrain enlists you in discovering the truth, and you learn from each of his lieutenants what their last moments were. Or rather, you learn of Aiden and Borthon's. Vargon's memory is far more clouded. I do not remember my name. Everything is clouded and obscure. I must flee, but I cannot. I'm trapped like a rat in a cage. He remembers nothing of his life, feeling only pain and despair. The name Keldrain inexplicably fills him with dread and loathing. From your talks with Keldrain's 3 lieutenants, you and Keldrain realize you betrayed him. Vargon. Keldrain recalls the argument he had with Vargon about the honor of the guard. You were confused. Why would Vargon help the enemy if he was loyal to the guard? I suspect he did not think that we could fail, even if the enemy knew our strategy in advance. And we did not fail immediately, for the guard is strong. He hoped to show me that I was wrong, but at a terrible cost. Vargon thought to prove to Keldrain that even if the enemy knew the tactics, the guard would prevail. If the guard triumphed, there was no danger in keeping the women and children within the city. Vargon paid with his life for his arrogance. Keldrain, however, was far from the only member of the guard betrayed, and Vargon was not the only one who betrayed Keldrain. No, the greatest treachery of all came from a corner nobody expected. The captain of the guard, Bale.